I still remember the moment I saw her name flash on my screen. Becca Simmons, junior analyst, start date, May 1st, 2025. My pulse hammered so loud I could almost hear it over the click of my keyboard. I'd spent 8 years at Meridian Data Solutions, clawing my way from a temp in the mailroom to director of client relations. I'd built every bridge, smoothed every crisis, polished every pitch. I thought I was indispensable, until the day my little sister Becca walked in. It started innocently enough. A Tuesday mid-morning when I was wrapping up the McAllister presentation, scheduling, budgets, talking points, when HR pinged me, "Could you meet with Director Ramirez at 11?" I swallowed a mouthful of stale coffee and replied yes. Ramirez was the VP who'd sponsored my promotion 2 years ago. We'd always been allies. At 11 o'clock sharp, I knocked on her door. "Come in, Jamie," she said, her voice smooth but her eyes unreadable. She tapped her desk, an envelope. I slid into the chair. "Your sister," she began, voice clipped, "applied for the junior analyst position." She slid the manila folder toward me. She ticks every box: economics major from State U, 2 internships, glowing references. She started on Monday. I felt the floor drop out. My sister? But I gestured at the folder. "I haven't seen this. Why didn't HR loop me in?" Ramirez sighed. "We tried? She's under your maiden name." She tapped the folder. "When we realized the connection, the hiring committee said we'd give her the same consideration. We forwarded her performance plan to you." She paused. "You didn't comment." I swallowed. I was swamped. I didn't connect the dots. My stomach twisted. "So she's on the team now?" She nodded. "Officially reporting to you." My jaw clenched. "Okay, great." I forced a smile. "Bot time. I'll welcome her." After I left her office, the version of me who loved family jumped at the chance to show Becca around. But by the end of that week, after I'd sat through her wide-eyed freshman analyses and gratuitous thank you notes to every department head, I realized it wasn't family bonding, it was competition. Every minor triumph of hers echoed against my own record. She predicted a minor market shift that saved a $50K account. She spotted a billing error I'd missed. She dazzled a client with her youthful energy. Meanwhile, I was haunted by my own successes. Once celebrated, now just expected. On Monday morning, the email arrived. "Jamie Parker. End of probationary period. Role realignment discussion scheduled." My stomach dropped. A role realignment? As in no more director? As in maybe no more job? My hands shook as I typed back yes, confirming for Thursday at 4 p.m. That afternoon, I found a quiet corner in the half-lit break room, coffee in hand, bracing for the meeting. Becca popped in behind me, humming. "Hey, sis." Her grin so wide it hurt. "Hey, Becca," I said, voice brittle. "Busy week." She slapped me an Air 5. "I just closed a mini deal with Vantage Corp. They upgraded their package on the spot." Her eyes sparkled. "I know it's early, but could we lock down a training schedule? I'd love your insights." I swallowed. "That's awesome. We'll set something up." She patted my back, oblivious to my crumbling calm. Then she left with a cheery wave, and I wondered how many people at Meridian cheered for me anymore. By 4 p.m., my office was cold. Ramirez ushered me in without preamble. "Have a seat," she said. "I have some unfortunate news." I sat. My coffee sloshed. After evaluating team performance and restructuring to meet the new Q4 targets, she continued. "We've decided to dissolve the Director of Client Relations role. Your position is being eliminated. You'll receive severance per company policy." I blinked. "You're firing me for my sister?" She exhaled an almost human gesture. "It's not about her, Jamie. It's about streamlining leadership layers. Your new title is Senior Analyst, reporting to Becca." I laughed. It sounded like a joke. "So I get demoted to analyst, put under my sister who just graduated college." She pursed her lips. "You have until end of day Friday to accept or refuse. If you refuse, you'll receive full severance and benefits through the end of next quarter." I stood. "Fine." I slid out of my chair. "I refuse." I turned and left the room, head spinning, corporate betrayal twisting like barbed wire in my gut. I packed my desk that night. The framed photo of my college grad, my door nameplate, the collection of half-drunk candles I'd bought for Zen vibes, it all went into boxes. I tried not to look at the cubicle across the hall, where Becca's name glowed on the screen. As I tapped the final stack of files closed, I felt hollow. 8 years, reduced to a single refusal email. I walked out through the lobby, my CV in hand, ready to start over or collapse. In the parking lot, I paused beside my car. A young man in a sleek suit passed with a laptop bag. I could almost imagine him in my seat tomorrow. I loosened my tie, heading home to tell my husband. But then, standing next to my car, stood a delivery man from the legal department. He handed me a sealed folder. "This was left for you," he said. No note, just my name scrawled on the front. He drove off, leaving me alone under the harsh lot lights. Inside, I flipped the seal, a corporate stock ledger. My heart hammered, scrawled across the top. Confidential, Jamie Parker Ownership Trust. My hands tremored. In the decades-long merger talks Meridian had weathered, I'd quietly, secretly built a silent majority, behind the scenes, proxies, shell holdings, all untaxed, undiscovered. I owned the very company now axing my career. I stared at the pages, percent holdings in various subsidiaries, entitlement to voting rights, controlling interest, waiting for my command. They'd fired me, only to realize too late that I was the company's largest private stakeholder. My phone buzzed, a text from Becca. "I'm so sorry, sis. Please talk to me." I tucked the folder under my arm, took a deep breath of the night air, and whispered, "Let's talk." And for the first time, I knew I wasn't powerless. I tucked the heavy folder under my arm and stepped out of the half-lit parking lot into the cool night air. The evening breeze smelled faintly of rain and exhaust fumes, a strangely fitting contrast for my mood. Behind me, the corporate headquarters loomed like a cathedral of broken promises. Ahead, the empty street stretched into darkness. I paused under a lone street lamp, my hands trembling as I flicked on my phone's flashlight to examine the folder's seal more carefully. Meridian Data Solutions, confidential, executive holdings. Below it in smaller script, property of the Parker Trust. My mind spun back to the day my father taught me about trusts and estates, when I was 16. His dry lecture on asset protection had lain dormant until now, resurfacing like a perfectly preserved seed. At the time, I'd been too busy planning my move to New York to launch my career to think much of family finances. But there was a reason he insisted I learn. He'd set up the Parker Trust years ago, transferring major shareholdings in Meridian, his company, to me and my siblings, as a way to protect family wealth from future takeovers. In the fine print, the trust had a clause: if any beneficiary were unjustly removed from the company, all voting rights would transfer to the remaining beneficiaries. Which meant that since they'd just fired me in favor of my sister, I'd triggered a clause handing control to, well, me. I took a deep breath, forcing my legs to move. I needed the courthouse, a lawyer, anyone who could verify my interpretation. But the closest legal aid office was downtown, and the clock read 8:45 p.m. I decided instead to head home, regroup, and enlist my husband's help. He'd always been a sensible partner, level-headed, analytical. We'd figure out the next step over a glass of whiskey. So I climbed into my car, cradling the folder on the passenger seat, and drove home through the city's winding streets. At home, warm light spilled from our living room window. My husband, Mark, looked up from his laptop when I stepped inside, holding the envelope like a trophy. "You look like hell," he said, concern softening his features. I closed the door behind me and exhaled. "They fired me," I said, "promoted Becca over me." I dropped onto the sofa, splayed the folder on the coffee table, and peeled open the top page. "But I just found this." His eyes widened as I explained the trust clause. "So by firing you, they accidentally made you the controlling shareholder," he said, running a hand through his hair. "That's insane and incredible." I nodded, handing him the folder so he could skim the key sections: trust formation date, the beneficiary list, the removal clause, and the cap on maximum shares. "We need to be airtight before we do anything. I need to confirm with a trust lawyer." He set aside his laptop. "I have a friend at Caldwell and Ross tomorrow morning at 9. Should I set it up?" I smiled, feeling some of the adrenaline drain away. "Yes, and print 2 copies of these pages. One for the lawyer, one for backup." I rose and headed to the bar cart, mixing 2 neat fingers of bourbon. "Thank you," I said quietly. He poured, handed me a glass, and sat beside me. "We'll get through this," he said, clinking his glass against mine. "You have more leverage than you know." I nodded and sipped the burn. For the first time since the meeting, I felt a flicker of power. I closed my eyes, tasting the whiskey and the thrill of possibility. The next morning, I arrived at Caldwell and Ross with carefully labeled copies of the trust document. Within minutes, I was seated in a brown leather chair opposite senior partner Eleanor Caldwell, whose sharp eyes dodged behind reading glasses. Mark stood beside me, arms crossed. Eleanor flipped through the pages. "Your father was meticulous," she said, tapping the removal clause. "This trust is rock solid. If a beneficiary is involuntarily terminated, their shares are redistributed among the remaining beneficiaries. And you're the sole remaining beneficiary." She lifted her gaze, "since you alone refused the role change. Your sister took the junior analyst role, but you were moved out entirely, correct?" I swallowed. "Yes. They offered me the senior analyst position under my sister, and I refused." Eleanor nodded. "Then the condition is met. You now hold 51% of voting rights, enough to control the board." She closed the folder. "You have two options. You can reinstate yourself as Director of Client Relations, retaining your seat on the Executive Committee, or you can remain out of a day-to-day role and exercise authority as the controlling shareholder, appointing new leadership, restructuring the board, or even pursuing a buyout." She raised an eyebrow. "Your call." I exchanged a look with Mark. "I want my job back," I said firmly. "And I want Becca removed from the company." Eleanor tilted her head. "You're asking to reinstate yourself and fire your sister?" I nodded. "Yes." Eleanor leaned forward. "Family drama aside, Meridian will never survive a shareholder revolt that slaughters your bloodline." She cleared her throat. "You'll need to call an emergency board meeting, present your claim under the trust, and gain a simple majority vote to reinstate your position and appoint an interim VP who reports to you. Then you can terminate employees at will. But they'll try to negotiate. Expect resistance." I squared my shoulders. "I'm ready." Within the hour, I filed a formal notice calling for an emergency board meeting at Meridian's headquarters for 72 hours later. I emailed the notice, not to Becca, but to the corporate secretary and each board member, copying the trust document pages. I set the tone in the cover email. "Per the Parker Family Trust, dated March 12, 2017, I hereby exercise my controlling voting rights to call this meeting to address my unlawful termination and request reinstatement as Director of Client Relations, and to discuss corrective personnel actions, including the termination of inappropriate incumbents." Becca texted me a flurry of worried messages. "What's going on? Are you okay?" I didn't reply. Instead, I told Mark, "No leaks. This was corporate law, not family gossip." I needed solid ground. 3 days later, I walked into the gleaming boardroom 15 minutes before the 9 a.m. meeting. The long mahogany table held nameplates for each director: Ramirez, the VP who'd fired me; Carter, head of finance; Lynn, CTO, and 3 independent outside directors. Becca sat near Ramirez, fidgeting in her seat. She looked pale. Her first board meeting, no doubt. At precisely 9 a.m., I tapped the gavel. The chairman's seat was mine by virtue of controlling shares. The assembled directors turned toward me. "Good morning," I said evenly. "Thank you for attending on short notice. I'm here to enforce the terms of the Parker Family Trust, which grants me controlling voting rights due to the involuntary elimination of my position." Ramirez opened her mouth, then clicked her tongue. Carter scowled. Lynn looked confused. Becca bit her lip. I continued. "First order of business, reinstatement of my role as Director of Client Relations. Second, termination of the junior analyst, Becca Simmons, for the conflict of interest in my termination, effective immediately." Murmurs rippled around the table. The outside directors exchanged glances. Principal among them, Dr. Fiona Chen, tapped her pen. "Miss Parker, are you aware that Miss Simmons has already begun her probationary period? There are contractual severance costs if we terminate her now." I nodded. "I'm aware. I'm also aware that we need leadership continuity. Therefore, I propose the immediate appointment of Mr. Javier Morales as interim head of client relations. He is qualified, experienced, and ready to step in." Ramirez snapped. "Miss Parker, this is a hostile takeover. You can't just—" I held up a hand. "I can and will. Voting now." I clicked a remote, and an electronic voting panel lit up on screens behind us. Each director tapped yes or no. Martinez, yes. Carter, yes. Lynn, yes. Ramirez, no. Becca, she hesitated, then tapped no. But that made 3 yes votes out of 5. A simple majority. I inhaled. Motion carried. I turned to Ramirez. "Please reinstate my position and prepare Miss Simmons' termination package." "Miss Chen, Please oversee interim appointments. I tapped the gavel. Meeting adjourned. I rose and gathered my folder. Becca's eyes filled with tears. She stood. Jamie. Please, she began. I shook my head. I'm sorry. Then I left, head high, knowing I'd restored justice. That afternoon, I returned to my old office, familiar mahogany desk, the framed photo of my college graduation, the Eames chair. I set my folder down, ran my hand over the leather blotter. For the first time in days, I felt at home. My phone buzzed. It was Becca. Can we talk? I understand why you did this. I'm sorry. I typed back, tomorrow 8 a.m., coffee in the cafeteria. In that moment, I realized that power built on family bonds could still lead to reconciliation. And as I looked out the window at the city skyline, I understood that even the harshest boardroom battle could yield a firmer, fairer foundation. Because sometimes the people who fire you think they own the company. But the ones with the vision and the trust really hold the keys.